They say you should never bite the hand that feeds you. But what happens when that same hand tries to choke the life out of your marriage? You don't just bite back. You tear down their entire empire. Welcome back to Dad's Silent Revenge. If you're new here, maybe hit that subscribe button to join the family. Now, grab your favorite snack, settle in, and get comfortable, because today's story is a wild one. Hi, I'm Mark, and this is the story of how my father-in-law tried to ruin my marriage by publicly humiliating me. He honestly believed his wealth made him a god. He thought a sudden, brutal demotion would make my wife see me as a pathetic failure. He was convinced she would pack her bags and run back to him. But he made one fatal, catastrophic miscalculation. He forgot that I was the only person keeping his fragile, outdated company from completely collapsing. And my perfectly timed resignation? It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a death sentence for his life's work. To understand how we got to that explosive day, you need to know about Richard. He was the founder and CEO of a highly profitable global logistics firm. To the outside world, he was a brilliant titan of industry. But behind closed doors, he was an arrogant, controlling narcissist who demanded absolute worship. Then there was Sarah, his daughter, and my wife. She is the exact opposite of him, kind, grounded, and fiercely independent. When we met, I was just a data architect. We fell in love, but the moment Richard found out she was dating a glorified computer repairman, the silent war began. At our wedding, he smiled for the cameras, hugged me, and whispered that I would never be good enough for his little girl. A year later, Richard did the unthinkable. He offered me a critical, high-paying job in his growing company. I honestly thought it was an olive branch. I was wrong. It was a trap. Against my better judgment, I took the job. The salary was massive, and Richard promised me total control over the company's digital future. Sarah was hesitant. She knew her father's nature better than anyone, but we were saving for our first home, and the money was life-changing. My official title was Director of IT and Data Systems, but when I actually looked under the hood of Richard's company, I was genuinely horrified. Calling his systems outdated would be an insult to the word. They were running a multi-million-dollar logistics empire on software from the early 2000s. Servers crashed weekly. Inventory was tracked on messy, disorganized spreadsheets. It was a ticking time bomb. If a major server failed, the company would lose millions in a single afternoon. So, I rolled up my sleeves and went to work. For 2 straight years, I lived in that office. I worked 60-hour weeks. I rebuilt their entire database from the ground up. I wrote custom automation scripts that handled dispatch, inventory, and payroll. I essentially dragged Richard's dinosaur of a company kicking and screaming into the modern age. Efficiency skyrocketed, and profits hit record highs. Did I get a thank you? Of course not. Richard used every meeting to remind me that I was just the help. He would proudly take credit for the increased margins, ignoring the systems I built. Let's leave the business strategy to the adults, Mark. Just make sure the printers are working. It was humiliating, but I swallowed my pride for Sarah's sake. Richard thought I was just a tech guy he could bully. He had no idea that I now held the keys to his entire kingdom, and the only thing stopping it all from burning down was me. The breaking point came just after our 3rd wedding anniversary. Sarah and I had finally closed on our dream house, heavily relying on my executive salary. Richard knew this. He knew exactly how much debt we had just taken on. It was a Tuesday morning when his secretary told me to report to his office immediately. I walked in, expecting another one of his condescending lectures. Instead, I found him sitting behind his massive oak desk, wearing a sickeningly smug smile. "Mark, have a seat," he said, not even looking up. "We need to talk about restructuring." He then calmly explained that my role was being eliminated, not fired, just reassigned. He was demoting me to a junior helpdesk position in the basement. Oh, and he was cutting my salary by 60%. Effective immediately. I stared at him, trying to process the absolute absurdity of it. "Richard, I built the entire infrastructure you're using. You don't even know the admin passwords to the main servers." He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "The systems run themselves now, Mark. You should be grateful you still have a job." Then his smile widened into something truly venomous. "Let's see how Sarah feels about her husband when he can't even pay the mortgage. Women need stability, Mark. When they don't get it, they tend to run back to their fathers. In that split second, everything clicked. This wasn't about the company's budget. It was a calculated, precision strike aimed directly at my marriage. He wanted to break my spirit so Sarah would lose respect for me. Most men would have yelled, thrown a punch, quit on the spot. But I just looked at him, completely deadpan. "Okay, Richard," I said. "I accept the new role." He thought he had broken me. He didn't realize he had just handed me the match to burn his empire to the ground. Moving my office to the windowless basement was meant to be the ultimate walk of shame. Richard made sure everyone saw it. I packed up my executive corner office while junior staff whispered in the hallways. When I got home that night, I told Sarah everything. She was furious. She wanted to drive over there, storm into his office, and tear him apart. But I held her hands, looked her in the eyes, and told her my plan. Instead of leaving me like Richard so arrogantly predicted, she smiled. She was fully on board. So, I played the part of the defeated son-in-law perfectly. I sat at my tiny basement desk, answering basic password reset tickets and fixing jammed printers. But behind the scenes, I was a ghost. You see, when I built Richard's automation systems, I designed them to need regular, manual maintenance. Custom scripts had to be updated, API tokens refreshed, and server caches cleared. None of that was in my new job description as a Tier 1 helpdesk tech. So, I simply stopped doing it. I strictly worked to rule, letting the digital rot quietly set in. But I didn't stop there. I legally formed my own independent IT consultancy. Because of my previous executive role, I had built solid relationships with Richard's top 3 clients, the ones who made up 70% of his revenue. They didn't care about Richard's ego. They cared that their logistics data flowed smoothly. And they knew I was the one making that happen. For 3 months, I quietly built my exit strategy while Richard strutted around, thinking he had won. He was planning a massive multi-million-dollar contract renewal with his biggest client, completely oblivious to the fact that his entire system was held together by duct tape and my silent mercy. And my mercy was about to run out. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. About 6 weeks into my demotion, the first warning signs appeared. A delayed shipment here. A missing invoice there. Small glitches that, in the past, I would have quietly fixed before anyone even noticed. But I wasn't the director of IT anymore. I was just the basement guy. When the dispatch software started lagging, causing a 2-hour delay on a major delivery, Richard threw a fit. He sent a furious, company-wide email demanding the issue be resolved instantly. I received the standard helpdesk ticket. I looked at the error, smiled, and calmly typed back, "Unable to resolve." This requires administrator privileges, which were revoked during my reassignment. And I hit send. Richard was livid, but his ego wouldn't let him back down. Instead of giving me my access back, he hired a cheap third-party IT contractor to fix the problem, but my code was highly customized. These new guys had absolutely no idea what they were looking at. They were just slapping cheap band-aids on a rapidly sinking ship. Meanwhile, the clock was ticking. Richard's biggest client, a massive national retail chain, was scheduled for their annual audit and contract renewal in just 2 weeks. This single contract was the absolute lifeblood of his company. As the big day approached, the main database started throwing critical error codes. The server memory caches I used to clear manually were hitting 99% capacity. The entire digital infrastructure was wheezing, struggling to breathe. But Richard was too busy picking out a new luxury car to celebrate his upcoming renewal to notice. He had no idea the cliff was right in front of him. And I was getting ready to give him a little push. D-Day finally arrived. It was the morning of the massive contract renewal. Richard had catered a lavish breakfast and was wearing a bespoke suit that cost more than my entire basement salary. The executives from the national retail chain were sitting in the glass boardroom, waiting to see the real-time logistics data that proved Richard's company was still their best option. Down in the basement, I was watching the server health dashboard on my secondary monitor. The memory cache hit 99.9%. I leaned back, took a sip of my coffee, and waited. 10 seconds later, boom, the dashboard flashed red. Then, every single screen in the dispatch center went black. The automated sorting belts stopped. The inventory database returned a fatal system error. The entire multi-million-dollar operation flatlined in the middle of a Tuesday morning. Upstairs, absolute chaos erupted. Through the ceiling vents, I could hear the shouting. The cheap third-party IT contractors were running around like headless chickens, sweating through their shirts, mashing keyboards with absolutely no clue how to restart my custom master servers. The VIP clients in the boardroom were staring at dead screens, their patience evaporating by the second. My desk phone rang. It was Richard's secretary, her voice trembling. "Mark, Richard needs you in the main server room. Now. It's an absolute emergency." I didn't rush. I slowly finished my coffee, straightened my tie, and picked up a crisp, white envelope I had printed out the night before. I walked up the stairs at a perfectly leisurely pace, listening to the beautiful sound of Richard's empire crashing down. It was time to deliver the final blow. I walked into the main server room, and it looked like an absolute war zone. The cooling fans were screaming, red error lights were flashing everywhere, and Richard was standing in the middle of it, completely unhinged. His bespoke suit was wrinkled, and his face was purple with sheer panic. The moment he saw me, he snapped his fingers. "Mark, finally, fix this immediately. The entire National Retail Board is sitting in my conference room staring at blank screens. Get the system back online. Now." I didn't touch a keyboard. I just stood there, perfectly calm, and looked at him. "I can't do that, Richard." He stepped toward me, his voice dropping to a vicious, desperate whisper. "I am not playing games with you, boy. I am ordering you to fix my servers. And I am reminding you," I replied smoothly, "that I am a Tier 1 help desk technician. I don't have administrator privileges. Remember? You revoked them. I literally cannot access the core database." Real, raw panic flickered in his eyes for the very first time. "I'll give them back. I'm reinstating you. Just log in and fix it." That was the moment. I slowly reached into my jacket, pulled out the crisp white envelope, and placed it right in his trembling hands. "Actually, Richard, I won't be doing that. Because as of this exact second, my resignation is effective immediately." He stared at the envelope like it was a venomous snake. You can't quit. I'll sue you. I'll ruin you." "You can't sue someone for quitting a minimum wage help desk job," I smiled. "Good luck with the clients, Richard." And with that, I turned around and walked out, leaving him standing in the ashes of his own arrogance. Walking out of that building felt like stepping into the sunshine after years in a dark cave. My phone started ringing before I even reached my car. It wasn't Richard. It was the vice president of the national retail chain, the very same VIP who was just sitting in Richard's dark, chaotic boardroom. I had sent him a quiet email the night before, officially introducing my new independent consultancy. He was furious at Richard's sheer incompetence and wanted out immediately. By noon, they had officially pulled their multi-million-dollar contract from Richard's firm. By 2 p.m., they had signed an exclusive agreement with my new company. Without me to fix the custom servers, Richard's system stayed down for 3 agonizing days. The cheap third-party contractors accidentally wiped a month of dispatch data while trying to force a reboot. The domino effect was instantaneous and absolutely brutal. Without his flagship client, and with operations completely paralyzed, Richard's other major clients panicked. Word spreads fast in the logistics industry. Within a month, his 2 other top accounts abandoned ship and walked right through my front doors. Richard tried to sue me, of course. He spent thousands on corporate lawyers, claiming I deliberately sabotaged his company. But every legal audit proved the exact same thing. I didn't write a single piece of malicious code. I simply stopped doing the extra, unpaid work he specifically told me wasn't my job. I followed his demotion instructions to the absolute letter. His company hemorrhaged money. 6 months later, the man who thought he was a titan of industry had to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The best part? When the walls started closing in, Richard finally tried to call Sarah. He begged her to talk to me, to make me give his clients back. He actually thought he could still manipulate her. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just calmly told him that he was right about one thing: women do need stability. And thanks to my new business, she had never felt more secure. Then, she blocked his number forever. It's been 3 years since that explosive Tuesday morning, and honestly, life has never been better. Our independent IT consultancy isn't just surviving, It's thriving. We finally bought that dream house we were saving up for, and Sarah recently gave birth to our first child. Our marriage is stronger than ever. The fire Richard tried to start to burn us down only forged us into steel. As for Richard, last I heard, the bank foreclosed on his sprawling luxury estate to cover his massive business debts and corporate legal fees. He's now living in a modest, rented two-bedroom apartment across town. He still tells anyone who will listen that he was robbed, blaming everyone but his own ego. But without his money and his CEO title, his empty arrogance doesn't scare anyone anymore. He is just a bitter, lonely old man. There is a profound, unavoidable lesson in all of this. If you are lucky enough to have loyal people who sacrifice their own time to build your kingdom, you had better treat them with absolute respect. Bank accounts and corporate titles do not make you invincible, and if you push a calm, hard-working person into a dark corner, don't act surprised when they decide to burn your whole building down on their way out. Thank you for hanging out and listening to this complete story here on Dad's Silent Revenge. I have to ask you guys, what would you have done if your father-in-law pulled a toxic stunt like that? Would you have quit on the spot, or played a long, silent game of chess just like I did? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this ultimate dose of sweet karma, please hit that like button, subscribe to the family, and turn on those notifications. Until next time, stay smart, protect your peace, and never let anyone disrespect your worth. You would think losing his empire, his mansion, and his relationship with his daughter would be enough of a wake-up call. But if you thought this story ended with a simple bankruptcy, you clearly don't understand how a true narcissist operates. About 3 months after his company officially went under, a man in a cheap suit knocked on my front door and handed me a thick stack of legal papers. I had been served. Richard was suing me for $10 million. The official charge? Corporate espionage, intellectual property theft, and deliberate sabotage. He told his lawyers that I had maliciously written a kill switch virus into his servers before I left, and that I had illegally stolen his confidential client list. Sarah was worried, but I just poured myself a cup of coffee and smiled. I knew exactly what I was doing. When you are dealing with a man like Richard, you document absolutely everything. During the legal discovery phase, my defense attorneys demanded full access to Richard's historical financial records. We argued that to prove the supposed value of the stolen data, we needed to see the raw accounting books from the last 5 years. Richard's lawyers fought it aggressively, but the judge ordered them to hand the hard drives over. And that is exactly when my legal team found the buried treasure. It turns out, my father-in-law wasn't just a terrible boss, he was a massive fraud. While he was paying me a miserable basement salary and cutting employee benefits, he had been illegally skimming hundreds of thousands of dollars from the company accounts. He was hiding assets in dummy corporations to dodge corporate taxes and fund his ridiculous luxury lifestyle. He wanted to dig a grave for me in court, but he accidentally handed my lawyers the exact shovel needed to bury him forever. Finding out your arrogant father-in-law was secretly committing massive corporate fraud was like striking absolute gold. But I wasn't going to just use it to quietly win a civil lawsuit. Oh no, I was going to make sure the right people saw those books. My lawyers didn't just use this discovery to get his ridiculous lawsuit thrown out of court. They calmly compiled every single discrepancy, every fake vendor invoice, and every hidden offshore wire transfer into a massive, meticulously categorized binder. And then we did our civic duty. We mailed a pristine copy directly to the Internal Revenue Service. You see, when you arrogantly accuse someone else of destroying your business, you invite a magnifying glass into your own financial history. Richard's legal team immediately tried to withdraw the civil lawsuit the second they realized we had decrypted his real accounting ledgers. They were absolutely terrified. But the judge denied their motion to seal the records, and the snowball was already rolling down the mountain. About a month later, I was sitting in my new corner office when my phone buzzed. It was a local news alert. I clicked the video link, and there it was. A live helicopter shot showing federal agents walking out of Richard's remaining corporate building, carrying dozens of cardboard boxes filled with hard drives and paperwork. The man who loved to boast about his self-made wealth was now the primary target of a massive federal tax evasion probe. He had spent years treating his hardworking employees like garbage, cutting corners, and publicly humiliating me just to feed his fragile, monstrous ego. He honestly thought his money made him untouchable. But as he sat alone, Watching his final dirty secrets broadcasted on the evening news, he finally understood the gravity of his situation. He wasn't just broke anymore. He was hunted. The speed at which the federal government dismantled Richard's life was genuinely breathtaking. The IRS does not play around, especially when they are handed a perfectly organized binder of a multi-million-dollar tax fraud scheme. Within weeks of the raid, all of Richard's remaining personal assets were completely frozen. His luxury cars were impounded, his bank accounts were locked down, and his passport was seized. The local news had an absolute field day, constantly running his arrogant corporate headshot next to bold headlines about embezzlement and white-collar crime. It was during this terrifying freefall that Richard made one last, pathetic attempt to reach out to us. Since Sarah had blocked his personal number months ago, he used a borrowed phone from his exhausted defense attorney to leave a voicemail. We sat in our living room one evening, listening to the audio play through the phone's speaker. The man who used to bark orders like a king was now crying, real, ugly, desperate tears. He begged Sarah for a massive loan to cover his legal retainer. He pleaded with her to remember that he was still her father, claiming he was just a misunderstood businessman who made a few honest mistakes. Honest mistakes. He had systematically skimmed millions while laying off loyal workers, and he had actively tried to destroy his own daughter's marriage out of pure spite. Sarah listened to the entire 5-minute voicemail without shedding a single tear. When the recording finally ended, she didn't look angry, and she didn't look sad. She just looked completely indifferent. She calmly deleted the message, blocked the new number, and turned to me with a soft smile. "So," she said, smoothly changing the subject, "what do you want for dinner tonight?" That was the exact moment I knew Richard was truly dead to us. He wasn't a threat, and he wasn't even a painful memory anymore. He was just a ghost. The federal justice system moves slowly, but when it finally swings its heavy iron hammer, it absolutely does not miss. It took 18 agonizing months for Richard's criminal case to reach its conclusion. Facing a mountain of irrefutable evidence, his exhausted public defender convinced him to take a plea deal. Neither Sarah nor I attended the final sentencing hearing. We had much better things to do, like raising our beautiful newborn daughter and running a rapidly expanding tech consultancy. But my legal team kept me fully updated. They told me Richard walked into that courtroom looking like a hollow shell of his former self. His bespoke designer suits were gone, replaced by a cheap, ill-fitting blazer. He stood before the judge, still desperately trying to play the victim. He blamed the economy, he blamed his accountants, and of course, he even tried to blame his former son-in-law for exposing his private matters. But the federal judge wasn't buying a single word of it. She looked down from the bench and called his actions a calculated, selfish, and arrogant abuse of both his employees and the American taxpayer. Then, the gavel finally dropped. 5 years in federal prison for felony tax evasion and wire fraud, followed by a court-ordered financial restitution that would mathematically keep him completely broke for the rest of his natural life. The so-called titan of industry, the man who publicly humiliated me and tried to destroy my family just for his own amusement, was now officially a convicted felon. And his new permanent address was a concrete cell block. It's funny how the universe eventually balances the scales. While Richard traded his custom mahogany desk for a stainless steel prison toilet, our lives moved in the exact opposite direction. My independent IT consultancy didn't just survive his collapse, it absolutely exploded. With Richard's former top clients anchoring our portfolio, we expanded rapidly. But the absolute most satisfying part of our growth wasn't the money. It was the people. Over the next year, I tracked down several of the hard-working, underpaid employees that Richard had mercilessly fired, demeaned, or laid off. I offered them positions at my new firm, with fantastic salaries, real benefits, and most importantly, actual respect. We built a new, modern company from the ashes of his outdated dinosaur. A company built on competence and loyalty, not fear and fragile ego. At home, Sarah was thriving. Free from the constant toxic shadow of her father's manipulation, she completely blossomed. Watching her become an incredibly warm, loving mother to our daughter was the greatest reward I could have ever asked for. We made a quiet promise to each other. We were going to break the generational curse. Our little girl would grow up in a home filled with unconditional love, not a house where affection was treated like a conditional corporate transaction. Richard's ultimate goal was to prove that I was a worthless nobody who couldn't provide for his daughter. He wanted to break me so completely that I would crawl away in shame. Instead, his pure, unadulterated arrogance provided the exact catalyst I needed to build a real legacy. Looking back at everything, from that cramped, windowless basement desk to the beautiful corner office I sit in today, the irony is almost poetic. Richard truly believed that power was about making other people feel small. He thought that by stripping away my title and my paycheck, he could easily strip away my dignity. He didn't realize that true power isn't about the expensive chair you sit in. It's about the knowledge in your head and the people who actually stand by your side. Sarah stood by me when Richard tried to leave me with nothing, and together we built everything. There is a profound, unavoidable lesson in this entire saga. If you are lucky enough to have quiet, loyal people who sacrifice their own time to build your kingdom, you had better treat them with absolute respect. Bank accounts and corporate titles do not make you invincible, and if you push a calm, hardworking person into a dark corner, don't act surprised when they decide to burn your whole building down on their way out. Thank you for hanging out and listening to this complete story here on Dad's Silent Revenge. I have to ask you guys, what would you have done if your father-in-law pulled a toxic stunt like that? Would you have quit on the spot, or played a long, silent game of chess just like I did? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this ultimate dose of sweet karma, please hit that like button, subscribe to the family, and turn on those notifications. Until next time, stay smart, protect your peace, and never let anyone disrespect your worth.